All right. Here we go, all set to go. Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. My name is Danielle Stein-Fairhurst. So I am a financial modelling specialist. I am based in Sydney, in Australia, although at the moment I'm coming from to you from the UK. So I'm normally based in Sydney. It's my pleasure to be your host today for our virtual meetup. So we ran a similar event last month where we talked about using ChatGPT inside Excel for financial modelling. But today we very ambitiously labelled last month's session as part 1. And today is part 2. And I think, fingers crossed, there's going to be a part 3. So today we're going to just take it that little bit further, and we're going to discuss the use of dynamic arrays for financial modelling, and we're going to expand the functionality of dynamic arrays with using Lambda functions, using something called 5G, which we'll get into. We're also going to have a look at the options between flexibility and scalability, which is always a big issue, in Excel and also in Power BI, and the use of the new Fabric. So we've got a lot to cover today. So let me introduce you to our guests. First of all, we have got Lance Rubin, late night in Melbourne. Lance has a keen interest in technological advances, anything to do with technology and financial modelling. He is there at the moment. He's really interested in Fabric, so he's going to tell us all about that. We've also got Craig Hatmaker, who is the founder and inventor of 5G modelling, or you might even say the father of 5G modelling. Yeah. So he's retiring this week, so I'm sure we'll be hearing more from him. And lastly, but not least, we have got Jeff Robson. He's always on the cutting edge of new technology, and he is a specialist, particularly in lots of things to do with Excel and financial modelling, but particularly in dynamic arrays. So he's going to tell us a little bit about dynamic arrays. So hi, guys. Thanks so much for coming back again. It's great to see you all back. So thanks for coming from all different parts of the world. So I'm going to hand over to, I think, are you going to kick us off, Lance, and get you to share your screen?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Looks good. Okay, all right. I'll pass over to you. Yeah.
So thanks, everyone. As Danielle said, we're going to cover, this is about, bringing the world of scalability, flexibility to financial modeling and more importantly, exploring some of the latest innovations. So how do we merge these two areas, but also how do we get scale through dynamic arrays and LAMBDAs? We're going to look at a fast model. We're going to look a little bit about Power BI. If there's a bit of time, the end bit, we'll see how much time we've got, but obviously the main focus is dynamic arrays and LAMBDAs. Now, financial modeling and analytics sound the same, but they're actually quite different. And so financial modeling is more open and broader. Analytics and data analytics is much bigger data, so it's much deeper. So that's the challenges that we often have. But the key thing here is looking at the entire tech stack for finance and financial modeling. You want to think about automation. So we're going to absolutely cover automation in terms of building models quicker using dynamic arrays and LAMBDAs. We're going to touch on a little bit about analytics towards the end, and Fabric and Power BI. But then, of course, as everyone knows, our passion for all of us is the financial modeling, three-way modeling, and some of the Excel innovation. So the key thing here is really first looking at dynamic arrays. And I learned dynamic arrays first from Jeff. Actually, I watched some stuff that Jeff was doing, and that was quite impressive. And I thought, wow, okay, there's something that's really happening here. I'm going to need to dig in a bit deeper. So, Jeff, maybe just give a bit of a background in terms of what you've done with dynamic arrays. Obviously, I'll stop sharing, and you can sort of take people through your experience with dynamic arrays and how it hurts your brain sometimes when you've got to do certain things that are not always that easy.
For sure. So as Lance mentioned, I did start playing with dynamic arrays fairly early on, and really found them to be incredibly useful, but most of the time, but also incredibly frustrating some of the time as well. So yeah, good for many things, but as Craig will show very soon, you extend them with LAMBDAs, you can even make them do even more amazing things. So what I set up and what we demoed and what we showed in a previous session with that Danielle organized was a three-way financial model that I'd set up just using dynamic arrays. So it's a very simple model. I just have a few assumptions here, have a few tables of inputs underneath where I've got some products, some staff, and a few other bits and pieces. And then I used all of that to basically construct an entire model with just by putting formulas in one column. So all of the formulas in this model are either entered, well, I do have a few formulas over here as well, but most of the model hangs off this single column of formulas here. So it starts with a single sequence formula. So if people have used dynamic arrays before, dynamic arrays, or sorry, if you haven't used them before, these are formulas that basically copy themselves. So there's one formula here in this column, and there's nothing over here, even though it looks like there's stuff in those cells. So if I scroll all the way to the right-hand side, you can see my formulas and so on are stopping at period 60. And they're stopping at period 60 because in my setup, I told it up here that I want to have 60 periods. If I then change that to add another 12 periods onto my model, I go back into the model, and now my model, the entire model has now extended itself for another 12 periods. So all the formulas, everything has copied itself across. It is
so
amazing,
good for modeling, isn't it? Because I mean, that's the
Absolutely.
whole point of modeling, is having that consistency of formulas and being able to expand and contract. It's just gold for financial modelers for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to have a look at this model in more detail, as I said, we did a whole session on this previously, so I'm not going to kind of go through all of that again, but just wanted to highlight some of the other cool things in here. Because this is all based on tables as well, I can also do things like come back over here to my products table, and I could add in here, financial modeling for dummies, second edition or third edition. What are we up to now, Danielle? Second edition. All right. Version 2. All right. Make sure you get a copy of that. I didn't even know how much it costs. It should cost more than, let's say it should cost this much, but you can get it for a bargain basement price on Amazon of something a lot less than that. Oh, sorry, that's the sales volume.
That's volume.
All right.
That's volume, though.
All right. Let's put the monthly sales volume. This is the sales price. Need to pay attention, don't I? All right. I'm putting this in AUD. Let me put this down here. And it's probably selling like hotcakes, absolutely, and getting quick before the price increases. We won't really tell you what the gross margin is, but let's just put a number in there for now. So because I've added this into my table here, what it then does is it adds it, and these are all dynamic arrays, which is just equal to all of the products in that products column. So it adds it onto my unit prices, it adds it onto my sales unit calculations. If I scroll down here, there's the exchange rates added on, the sales in AUD, and all of the calculations now I have financial modeling for dummies number 2 in there. And it's been added into all of these calculations. So to me, that's the beauty of dynamic arrays. The frustration of dynamic arrays is that not all formulas spill. There are things that you can't do easily, like you can't have arrays of arrays. Not all formulas will automatically spill and so on. So it can also be frustrating. If you want to do some calculations, so if I come down here to the bottom, I've got some calculations down here for simulating a corkscrew, where I take basically using the scan with a lambda that I have to write. And it kind of looks a little bit scary here because scan is basically an accumulator function. So I'm accumulating the opening balance plus all of the movements up until whatever month they happen to be in. And that's kind of what this scan function is doing with a lambda. So it's not quite as intuitive. As Lance said, it does make your brain hurt sometimes trying to figure this stuff out. And some things are great and some things are very frustrating. What Craig is about to show you, though, is some ways that you can take dynamic arrays and make them more user-friendly. So with that, I will hand over to Craig, who will tell you all about his wonderful 5G as the father of 5G financial models using LAMBDAs.
I just actually popped the link to Jeff's session from last year.
Beautiful.
Chat.
Perfect.
Daniel, do you want to run that
Right,
first
thank you,
poll,
Daniel.
sorry, on dynamic arrays quickly before Craig gets into it? Because I think that was my bad. I should have asked for that poll. How many people have used, or, obviously Jeff was first cab off the rank.
I'm going to say what are dynamic arrays.
Was that you that said that? I can see somebody's voted.
No, that wasn't me, but I should have.
So there's four options. Have you used dynamic arrays? Yes, no. I don't have access to Excel 365, or what are dynamic arrays? And I can see there's a couple of people who voted the last two, but it's usually either yes or no. So okay, most people, okay, I think we've just about got. All right, and for those of you who are joining us live on Zoom, you should be able to see the results there, and we can see that 54% of people have used dynamic arrays before, and 38%
Beautiful.
have not. So, okay, yeah, so I think most people know what they are. That's good to know. All right. Okay. All yours, Craig.
So what we just saw was pretty amazing. Jeff has this model that will automatically expand in terms of periods, but it will also expand in terms of products and anything else that could be repeating elements. And so when you think about the productivity that this can introduce into modeling, dynamic arrays are just awesome. They are just incredible. They will make your work go much, much faster, and it will make it more secure. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But for right now, we're going to talk about how do we make the dream of dynamic modeling with arrays possible. We're going to listen to my spokes model.
Hi, I am Beyond Excel's AI spokes model. 5G makes the dream of dynamic arrays in modeling a reality.
Woo! That's fantastic. That's amazing.
So I'm having fun with, we in our last session, we talked about using AI in our business. We were primarily talking about using AI in Excel, which Jeff did a great job of showing. He's also has an add-in that's just amazing. So, but we can use AI in the rest of our business. And as you're seeing, I'm leveraging a product called DID to animate a video, a picture that was generated by DALL-E and a voice that was generated by 11 Labs. So I'm using all these AI tools and bringing them into my workflow to make this presentation. So let's hear what else she has to say.
Dynamic arrays speed model time to market, make static models dynamic, and dramatically reduce error potential.
So
reminded me of paintball.
So I'm having a little fun here. Let's move on to the next.
Dynamic arrays speed model development by reducing formula size and eliminating the copy to write step on every timeline calculation because they auto-extend.
Okay, so this is probably really important. A lot of, particularly people that are fans of fast modeling, and you've been told the rule of thumb, make sure all formulas are no longer than your thumb. So on the left side, you see a fast sum, and you see the range that it has to cover. On the right side, you see a dynamic array with sum. That dynamic array will cover that entire range. It's a smaller formula. The difference is that pound sign. The pound sign says, I'm going to take I'm referring to a dynamic array as it is, but I'm going to have the entire range that dynamic array points to. So if it changes, unlike the fast model, that BQ37, if we add more periods, that BQ37 has to be changed. You would have to change that. But in the dynamic arrays, you don't. You just leave that formula as is, and it auto extends. So that is it makes your speed to market just incredibly fast, and it also reduces errors. Let's listen to her again.
And Craig, sorry, just quickly on that, it's not just that formula that extends, it's every other formula that is also a lambda or dynamic array will also extend, like what Jeff showed, right? So it's leveraging what Jeff showed, but now something a lot simpler.
So let's move on.
Auto-extend makes it possible to add things like more model periods in seconds without any modeler intervention.
And Jeff showed that very clearly just a little while ago. Let's go on.
Auto-extend makes inconsistent formulas impossible because there is only one formula cell for each timeline calculation. All other cells spill from that single cell and single formula.
So there, if you were to hit delete on those formula, all those cells to the right of the first formula cell, nothing would happen because you can't delete them. There's nothing there. They are spills. It is absolutely impossible to make a dynamic array have an inconsistent formula. Next, please.
Converting traditional model formulas to dynamic arrays formulas is incredibly easy as demonstrated here. Most of the work is adding a pound sign after each cell address that references an array.
So this is someone else's fast model that I borrowed because I wanted to make sure that I'm using something that you might be faced with. Here's someone else's model. Can you convert it for me? You just saw me converting it. Now, there are some issues, and we'll get into that a little bit later about dynamic arrays, but most of what I had to do was what you just saw. Add the pound sign to the end of the formula of the reference that references a dynamic array. Let's go on.
Pound sign or hash? I don't know. Sorry, I thought we called it a hash, but maybe it's pound
No,
in the US.
it's an American thing.
It's us
It
Yanks,
means
man.
It means a hash.
We
Okay,
call
yeah,
it pound signs.
Well, pound is GPP, but anyway, but we won't get technical.
While dynamic arrays are fantastic, they have a shortcoming that prohibits using them in traditional models without lambdas. But lambdas are complex and scary. That is where 5G comes in.
Okay, so when we saw Jeff he got to the point of the corkscrews and he brought in that scan formula for many of you. That's like, what are we talking about? How does that work? Jeff reminded me that it's possible to simulate corkscrews with just straight up dynamic arrays. That's some corkscrews, but not all corkscrews. And so we need to have something that'll make life easier for us. What can we do to make life easier? Let's ask.
5G turns scary lambdas into user-friendly components.
And the next, please.
These components enable novice modelers to perform complex calculations that normally require experts. This is because 5G components are written by experts and delivered in what looks and feels like Excel functions. Anyone who can use sum in a formula can use 5G components.
Okay, so there's a question on some of these, and I'll address some of them now, which is like what happens when you enter a formula into the spill cells? You create a spill error. So you will know immediately that you've done something that you should not do. So no, you cannot change a formula in a spill zone. It'll stop the whole model. So let's go, but there was another question about what happens if you need to spill down? What happens there? So let's take a look.
To get started, we need Office.
Sorry, what's that?
That's all right. Sorry, we do need to. So this is what we need. These are the prerequisites before we can get into 5G. Okay.
To get started, we need Office 365 or Excel 2021. We also need Microsoft's free add-in, Advanced Formula Environment.
So here's how we get it.
To get the add-in, click Insert, click Get Add-ins. Search for Excel Labs. Click Add. Click Continue. Click Open.
You've become an absolute master at critiquing and making AI stop and talk. Craig, it's quite phenomenal. I was quite jealous watching your spokes model talk.
Yeah. So there's a trick about that. I can tell you a little bit later. But anyway, you just saw that if you have Office 365 or Excel 2021,
get the add-in, click.
You can get the add-in very easily. It's part of Excel. It's all free. It doesn't cost you anything. You not only get, well, we're only going to talk about advanced formula environment. So let's move on.
To get components open, Excel Labs, click Modules. In a browser, search for CBSE LAMBDAs. Select one of the links. Find the module needed for your model. Copy its URL. Click the Download from Cloud icon. Paste the URL. Check Add Formulas to New Module. Enter a short prefix, then click Import.
Okay, I probably should have explained this a little bit better before I got into here. I'm sorry, I probably assumed too much. But first of all, what is CBSE? It's a very technical term, component-based software engineering. It's been around since the 90s. You don't need to know that. It just needs to know that we chose to use the search term CBSE LAMBDAs because that is a fairly unique search term that will allow you to find components, 5G components, that you can then bring into your Excel model, and we will see how adding these components will enable you to do some amazing things in your modeling very, very easily. Next, please.
For this module, here are all the components that were loaded and are now ready for us to use.
Okay, so we have new formulas. We have new functions, rather, a better way of saying it. It's like Excel suddenly got an upgrade and it had things like depreciate, straight line depreciation, or movement, or corkscrew, or dividend. So there are, when we just did what my spokesmodel did, she downloaded all of these new functions from that component library, that 5G component library, and it's all free. Let's go on to the next.
And I think, Craig, the point you were trying to make is to build a depreciation schedule. Like that's one, like if you're a financial modeler, one of the first things you learn to do is build depreciation schedules, build loan calculations and loan amortization. Those are kind of the two things that you do. And now with something like that, you just, sort of speed up that process. It's just so much easier to build those sort of things.
It's as though Microsoft decided, let's add some financial modeling functions to Excel.
Yeah.
So we're filling in some gaps to address our industry. So here's how you would use them. Let's hear from our.
To use a component.
Oh, sorry.
To use a component, enter = and the component's name. Use autocomplete to more easily enter the function name. Add the function's arguments. Hit enter and watch as it completes the model section.
Okay, so take a look. It did several lines. It's created 5 lines of model for us, as well as many columns. And all we had to do was just tell it what you would normally need to know about a loan. What is the loan amount? What's the APR? What's its term? When does it start? How long is our model lasting? So that it knows to fill all columns of our model. And how many months are in each period. So our model could be a quarterly model, or it could be an annual model. It's okay. This formula, this function, this 5G component will automatically calculate all that for you and generate your opening balance, your interest, your payment, your closing balance, and your principal payment. All of it with one formula, spilling all the way across your entire model. Let's move on. What could be simpler?
Arrays make modeling quicker and more robust. Lambdas make dynamic arrays do things they cannot do on their own. 5G makes lambdas easy to use. 5G quick, correct, easy.
And that is all there is to it. Now, I see something down here. It says, is this something that can solve the circular reference in the loan amortization table where a macro would normally be the solution? And the answer is yes. I do not have any iteration turned on. There is no circular reference. There's no circular calculations. The component handles all of it. It's wonderful. It's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a question here, Craig, on how can you use dynamic arrays in a drop-down list without referring to another cell where a dynamic formula lives?
How can we use it in a drop down? So unfortunately, drop downs are a little finicky about using dynamic arrays, and we sometimes have to do some special things to make drop downs work with dynamic arrays, like give them names.
I usually find if you just use the hash or the £, they're not too bad. That question's from Christos, who I met last month in London. Hey, Christos.
Well, there you have your answer. Is you can just use the pound sign in the
Yeah, sometimes
data validation.
Sometimes the named range can help, but yeah. Cool. There's another question from Chinmaya. I don't know if you can see that, Craig. Why the name 5G? Are dollar signs, a couple of good questions here. Why the name 5G? What are dollar signs no longer relevant? And any docs on speed efficiency? So I think I know the answer to that one.
Okay, so why 5G? 5G means fifth generation. The first generation, there is a video that I have presented early on. It explains the progression. First generation was when of modeling started out when the first VisiCalc spreadsheet was available, and people started modeling using VisiCalc. And then there were some progressions that went on. The most recent progression was where we went to automating like Modano and OpenBox, where you have a tool that you can buy that you can then fill in some information and it will generate your model for you. This is the next generation where you're not having to buy tools. You're able to download components and do some of the same things that those tools do, but without having the burden of another tool to add on to Excel. As far as dollar signs, sometimes they're important. Depends on what you want to do. A lot of times they're not. Is there speed efficiencies in DAs versus non-DA models?
Huge.
So it's a two-edged sword. So one of the things that if you're doing just regular modeling, you're having to copyright and all that good stuff. So you're kind of self-limiting about how many cells and how complex your formulas are, because you don't want to write very complex formulas. But with a dynamic array, you can spill it to a gazillion cells. And yes, if you spill a gazillion cells, you're going to slow down your model. It's going to get slow because so many things are being calculated. That the advantage is that it takes you far, your productivity is just skyrocketed. So you're trading off a little, you might, if you expand a very complex model to a lot of, your customer comes in and says, hey, you know, that project, we just found out we're going to have a delay. It's no longer 3 years, it's 5 years. So you now have to extend your model out a bunch more months. Yeah, it'll get slower, but you did that in seconds, like Jeff demonstrated. So it's a trade-off of, to some degree, between your machine getting a little slower and your productivity just going right up through the roof. That's where you make money, because you're going to be producing the model in far shorter time, but you should be charging them exactly the same amount of money because you're competing with other people that are using the traditional methods. It's going to take them longer. So you can do it quicker. You can give it to them faster, and you should charge the same amount of money as they would have to pay anyone else. Yeah.
And Craig also shared on LinkedIn just this week, you know, we ran 10,000 simulations in 3 seconds. So there's that we did. And, you know, VBA to run 10,000 scenarios or simulations, copying and pasting a whole lot would, you know, again, would slow it down, but, you know, also be a challenge. So it's definitely a speed and efficiency increase, like nothing else. I think that's happened in Excel over the last while.
In a video I did with Win, we took that same model and extended it out to see if we could send it out to the end of Excel's sheet. So 16,000 periods, just for fun.
How did that go? No problems? I didn't see that one.
Just out of interest, that's about 1,033 years.
Wow. Okay.
So
how long did that take?
You could do it if you want to, yes.
Yeah.
It took a little bit longer to calculate, but yeah, not as long as it would take otherwise. So.
So Mayank has a question, says, in a specific period you want to test, what would be the interest in, for a specific cell within a spilled range if you wanted to change that? The 5G component that I showed doesn't allow that, but I do have 5G components that do. You can say that you can say, here are the periods in which I want to have changes in rates. So the idea, I should have said this, you saw the video of the child going into an adult. The idea is you're going to get these complex lambdas written by experts who then hand them to you, and then you can just use them. So you don't have to know Lambda at all. All you need to know is the name of the function that you use, and it'd be up to experts. There are people that want to do this sort of thing, and they're very smart. Peter Bartholomew's on here. He's one of the smartest people I know that does lambdas. So I'm hoping people like him will create these components that will allow everyone else to use them. And no matter what level of modeler you are, what level of Excel user you are, you just you get the advanced formula environment. You then find the lambdas that hopefully he has written, you download them, and you use them.
I love that next question, Marik, around transparency. I actually think there's more transparency with lambdas because you have to have proper documentation. You explain it where you stored your lambda in GitHub. You actually documenting and explaining it. It's open. Yes, it's a bit more complex to understand in terms of the code. It's no more complex than VBA, but ultimately it's about using it is easy because it's simple.
But it is a great question, and it's one that we've anticipated. So, so here's one thing I want you to consider. Can you take a look at how sum works? Can you open up the sum function, see the C# code that created it, and understand how it works?
Yeah.
We can't. It's a black box. We understand that. These aren't exactly black boxes, as Lance just explained. The source is available for you to see because it is native Excel functions. Lambda just encapsulate these native Excel functions and puts them into one function instead of having them all over the place, having lots of different cells. So you can see the source, and the Lambda, the 5G standard insists that we make these sources easier to read, but we also are looking forward to having a certification organization that would take a look at the lambdas, make sure that they are described appropriately, that they are tested, and that there are tests that the certification or agency can take a look at and confirm that the lambda does perform correctly for the tests that were given and does what is demonstrated by the documentation. So you'd have an independent agency, hopefully somebody like a PwC, that would say these lambdas are certified, and those would probably be for a fee. You'd probably have to pay for them, but what the heck, if it makes you more money by allowing you to deliver models quicker, it's well worth the investment.
I'm just going to launch the poll just to see. I'm interested to know, how many people are familiar with lambdas. We're kind of assuming people have kind of perhaps use them, or if not, at least know what they are. So that's interesting. Paul says, while we're waiting for that, Paul says, Lambda is fast and not understandable by everyone, which is heaven. So people can't easily make changes. Interesting. Okay. So we've got a couple of people that said, what are lambdas? We've got, have you used lambdas in Excel? Yes, no, I don't have access to 365. Or what are lambdas? Most people are saying no, they have not used lambdas, which they're a little bit more difficult, a little bit less accessible. So you would expect that. So I'm just going to share for those who are live on Zoom. 62% of people said that no, they haven't used lambdas, and the rest of them have or don't know what they are.
I might answer Tajay's question around IT and security.
Yeah, good one.
I know that there's I won't say who, but one of the big accounting firms are not able to use lambdas at the moment because within the Excel labs, you also have the generative AI add-in. And yes, the IT department will limit your ability to get certain add-ins like they do for all add-ins, right? It's no different to other add-ins. So the IT department can restrict it. And then of course that limits your innovation. And I think the generative AI is probably more of a data security risk than lambdas. I can't see why lambdas, what Craig has shown, he's not extracting or pulling data. There's all he's doing is you pulling in. It's no different to copying and pasting someone's VBA code into the workbook. So I don't think there's inherently a security risk with the Lambdas, but of course, because it's packaged within the same add-in as the generative AI, I think, certain, and I don't know one particular firm, they haven't allowed the Excel Labs add-in to be deployed yet because of the generative AI risk.
This goes straight into what I'm retiring from. I'm retiring as the IT director of a town. And we have an excellent cybersecurity rating. We are absolutely the best in our area. So I can tell you unequivocally, there are no security concerns about Lambdas. They're not VBA. VBA, absolutely. They've got every reason to be afraid of VBA. I can wreak havoc on your system with VBA. I cannot with Lambda. They are native Excel functions. They would have to ban native Excel functions. So I can understand why they might have concerns about add-ins, but the add-ins that are available through the Microsoft Store are vetted. Microsoft, it's like getting any software from Microsoft. If your IT department really has concerns, you want to send them to me, I'll be happy to answer their questions. But I can guarantee you that Lambdas represent absolutely no security concern whatsoever.
Good. Anything else?
Great. Okay. Yeah, a few, a couple of comments, questions. Lots of people interested in the security issues. Any other questions?
Looks like Ian's already been banned.
Yeah, a few people not able to access it. I mean, you can understand why, having add-ins are not allowed everywhere. And hopefully that's something that will get easier in the future.
Yeah, so as Neil mentioned, and I sort of answered another question earlier, you don't even need to have the advanced formula environment to write Lambdas. It just makes life a lot easier.
Mm.
Exactly.
Accessing other people's, for storing your own and for writing them in the first place. But you can certainly write them without. It's just harder.
Yeah, good point, Neil. Yeah, good.
Good.
Quiet while we're reading the chat. All right, do you want to, I think that's probably okay for now. We can probably move on. Was there more from you, Craig?
Yeah, so
I'm done.
Great. So over to you, Lance.
Can you please repeat? Well, I think anything repeating, you can do on the record. You can go back. It'll be recorded.
Yeah.
So, as we said, building models is good and easy and quick through dynamic arrays and Lambdas, but then you have the scale problem, right? When we've got multiple divisions and you've got a whole range of things that need to come in. So, Excel spreadsheets don't scale unless you reproduce them. And of course, then you have this really big challenge about sea of spreadsheets. And that's one of the reasons why that's a challenge. And then of course you get people wanting to go and, use other tools or something else. And I think, what do you use? Excel or Power BI, right? Power BI is really powerful. It is more scalable. You can use more data. It is more complex. And, you want to start distributing insights and dashboards. Absolutely. You've got multiple data sources and data sets. Definitely, the data size and the granularity, all these sort of things you've got to start thinking about when you start getting beyond just Excel, just for Craig's benefit. It's important to really understand what you're trying to solve. So I was on the Global Summit. In fact, Wynn and I think Matt Arlington had this roundtable discussion on when you use Excel versus Power BI. And, in many cases, a lot of the tools, assuming you're using modern Excel, which is Power Query, Power Pivot, and DAX, you are learning and you're using some of the same tools, particularly Power Query. So there's for you to go and scale something within Power BI is actually not as difficult as what you might think. Yes, it looks a bit scary, it's new tools, but ultimately it's got very similar functions and similar relationships in terms of data and how that all works. So really, this is a question of flexibility against scalability. So if I want a huge amount of flexibility, of course, I'll stay with Excel because it's easy to use, as we've seen as well, and I can create my own things. But the moment I want to get scale, then getting some of that flexibility comes a little bit more complex. Kind of almost similar to what Jeff was showing. When you start scaling some of the dynamic arrays, you kind of need lambdas. And then as you scale more and more and size becomes a problem, well, then you need to have something else. So definitely you want to look at that spectrum in terms of what needs scale versus what needs flexibility. So welcome the citizen data modeler, right? This is really what Fabric is trying to help us do. And for those that, and of course, this is just really, we're just going to touch on this. I think we are going to do part 3, and part 3 is going to go into this a lot more in Fabric. So I'm just going to scrape the surface because, of course, we've got, 20 minutes left, and there is so much to this. So I will go slowly so that people can follow. So this is a simple diagram to try and explain the problem. So wild west of spreadsheets, yes, you can solve a lot and you can reduce risk with lambdas and dynamic arrays. But the moment it becomes bigger than Excel, then you need to go potentially to a third-party application, often referred to as a OLAP cube-based system. Anaplan is an example of that. There's a whole range of those, and yes, some of those do work with Excel, but of course you then tied into their native scripting language. So you can't really leverage your own knowledge like Power Query or any of the other tooling. So in this case, you have a third-party intermediary warehouse, and then sometimes it connects to Power BI, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it connects to Excel, sometimes it's a bit more tricky. But actually what this is doing through Fabric is enabling you to use all of the Azure tooling. The data mart is one example of how you do that, where you start to build and ingest data in tables. Now, the beautiful thing with dynamic arrays, as you saw with Jeff and with what Craig was showing, is there's tables already structured. So you already have structured tables. So it really makes it easy. In fact, one of the takeaways that we are going to give for those that registered is the fast model, which has 240 periods. And I've tacked on a Power BI export tab, which uses dynamic arrays, which allows you to expand that. So an important thing of how do you get bigger modeling. So what does that data lineage look like? So you have Excel on the left as your source. You have a data mart, which is one way of doing it. There's many different ways to do this. You then have a data set. You then have the report, and then you can produce an app. And I think quite a while back, we did Power BI with an app with Danielle about taking models into apps. So if you haven't seen that one, again, that's on the Plum YouTube channel. That's one approach to scaling modeling using data marts. A data mart is basically a Azure database, but it's really easy to use. You're not writing SQL. It's a low code environment. Really easy to do, and you can see the data mart. I'm going to share my screen in a moment and actually go to. This is Power BI Online. Power BI is being rebranded to Fabric anyway. So if you see Fabric, it's basically the suite of data tools, almost like a data platform. So this is scaling through a modeling. So this is that fast model in Power BI, and we've got our income statement, our balance sheet, our cash flow. We have all of that, but we are using Fabric to store that. So this is underlying, this is a fast model, and we're applying that same. The next approach, because there's many ways to get data at scale. First one was data marts. This next one is using the lakehouse and storage and data flows. So data flows, if you've never heard of it, data flow is an online Power Query. So there's Power Query in Excel, there's Power Query in Power BI, and then there's online Power Query, which is called data flows. And in this case, it's data flow Gen 2, it's the second generation. And what we are doing here is we're taking the file, we've dumped the file into one lake. So this is the one lake, which is kind of like one drive. And then through data flows, we're allowing to pull that information into the lakehouse and then publishing that into a report. And then of course into the app. So those are two methods that I've used and tested and able to get the flow through. There are data pipelines, which I haven't got right yet. There's other things. This is still in preview, by the way. So if you are going to go down this rabbit hole, it's not yet fully formed yet. Microsoft is still doing a lot. But then now, this is another example. Here we're using Monte Carlo simulation. Now this model uses dynamic arrays underneath it. This is the same model that we ran 10,000 simulations. In this one, we're just showing 5,000 simulations. And lo and behold, it's funny, Copilot has hit Power BI before it's hit Excel, right? So Copilot is already in Power BI. It allows us to use it under quick measures. So if I want to write some complex DAX or I want to understand DAX, I can actually type it in, and there's a suggestion by Copilot. It generates it and can add it. So if you're finding that you're getting stuck on Power BI because of DAX, well, Copilot's going to help you. So I know we said we weren't going to touch too much of AI in the first part, but actually AI is going to be everywhere, as we know. So that's an important thing to remember, that AI is going to make our lives easier and is going to make it easier to adopt some of these tools and get better. Oops, I wasn't meant to show that. So let me quickly go through some of this. So this is one lake. So this is my Explorer. Can everyone see that screen, my screen? So, you know, I have OneDrive, I have a whole bunch of other stuff. OneLake basically is, as I said, similar to OneDrive, but it's specifically designed for the Fabric environment. So I have workspaces for those that are familiar with Power BI. These are different workspaces. Now within Fabric, I have my staging lakehouse and I have my files, and I've also got my tables. So in here, I've got my Power BI income statement export, Monte Carlo simulation export. If I want to go to the fast model, so what I did is I took the fast model. Here's my fast lakehouse. I dropped the fast three-way model with 5G components, 240 periods. This is the file that you will get when you follow the link on Danielle's, which she's going to share a link back to download some of the files in the slides. So all I'm doing is I'm dropping the file into this lakehouse, into OneLake. Then what I'm doing is I'm going online. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail because we'll do that in part 3. Here's Power BI Online. And now what I'm able to do is I'm able to, so here's my staging lakehouse, you know, where I've got that information. I'm using the data flows, and that's all going through into this report. So here I have the Monte Carlo simulation. So this is a page. So I have the Monte Carlo simulation, which I can show. And all of this information is coming from, it just takes a while because we're online to refresh. And all of that information is coming from the underlying Excel workbook, but now it's inside this environment. It's inside this data platform. And because it's Power BI, I can use it. Here's my slicer for enterprise valuation if I want to change that. And all of that changes. I can change my gross margin slicer. So here I have 5,000 simulations, and I'm looking at those. If I want to look at my model, so this is my model over the different periods. There's 60 modeling periods in here. There's 60 years. I can change that, and I can look at different margins and all the rest. So, you know, this is actually not as complex as what people might think. It's, you know, I haven't written a line of code. I haven't written SQL. And I have not stood up a data warehouse. I've used Fabric end to end. So that's, you know, quite an impressive thing, not having to use a data engineer. If I go back to this one, where this is now the file that Craig was showing. So the fast model, this is 240 periods. And what I've done is I've taken, there were 2 models. I think, Craig, originally the model you worked on only had a certain number of periods. So I think it only went up to, if I just look at these 2 models, so 2027, if I look at, I'll get rid of these. So the one model extends to further periods. You'll see on the top, whereas the one at the bottom stays static. So this is the normal fast model without dynamic arrays, and this one was the one that was extended to 240 periods. So I can have a look at that. This, by the way, these are not pretty, okay? I know that. But all I did was I dumped the file in here and I asked Fabric to create the report for me. It created this for me, just out of the box. This one, I did a bit more work and my team did a bit more work. By the way, this is Power BI Online, and this is the Power app, right? This actually sits on an app. This sits in, you can publish this to a phone. You can chat in Teams. You can subscribe to the report. You can do all sorts of things. And now, you can use all of that. If I go to Power BI Desktop, right? So we're talking about desktop versus online. So online, great, scalable, that's awesome. If I'm looking at Power BI Desktop, this is my Power BI Desktop now. Now what I have here is I have a mixed storage. So what I'm doing is I'm connecting, if I look to my data source settings, here I'm connecting to a direct query to a Power BI data set. This is the Future of Financial Modeling _5, which is our 5G. It's also the the workspace that I've connected to. And here I have my full three-way. My income statement, it's the same fast model that's underneath here, not a Medano model anymore. This is a fast model that's underneath this Power BI dashboard. Income statement, it's taking a while to refresh because it's getting an update from, it's probably also just taking some of the capacity from the Zoom session. So I have this, my income statement, sorry, my balance sheet, my income statement, and my cash flow. And I can see all of those, and I can change all of those for different periods or different quarters. All of that's available. If I flick to my other Power BI desktop, this is that Monte Carlo simulation that I just showed you online. And of course, you've got all of that sitting here as well. So this is the desktop version. And then, of course, you've got the ability to look at that online, share it online, and collaborate. So rather than spending all that money on an OLAD Cube system, invest in understanding Fabric, invest in understanding Power BI, and you will absolutely be able to scale modeling, staying with the Microsoft stack. Don't go outside it. Go outside it, and you're going to cause all sorts of challenges for yourself. You're not going to have control. You're beholden to other consultants. They're going to help you every time they want to change something. Here you have control. You can have control of everything. I can see my data model. I can see the information here. It's telling me it's powerbi.com. So it's telling me I'm getting these tables from Power BI. There's an API that I'm calling, that I'm getting my information, getting my EBITDA, I'm getting my COGS, my depreciation. All of that's available. I've got my measures. I've got everything I need. I've got dashboards that are, I think they're pretty cool, that you can share, collaborate, publish, and I can go and I can use this many times over. So I don't know, if I was a betting man and I had to invest my money, I'd invest my money in staying in the Microsoft stack and building out this capability for modeling without jumping into these other apps and other third-party tools, which just make it very difficult. In fact, many times we are building around these other ERPs and EPM systems to get the data out. So what does everyone want to do? They take the data out of the ERP into Excel, or they take it out into somewhere else because they want to play with it. It's everywhere. That's why Excel will never die. That's why Power BI will obviously go alongside it as data scales.
Yeah, I think Microsoft's really investing a lot in making sure that they stay relevant and keeping us all inside the Microsoft stack. There's a message from Tajay saying, am I missing something? You drop the financial model in the lake and it extracts all this stuff. I think there's a bit more to it than that. But
simplistically,
yeah.
Yes, but there's a lot more that goes behind that. It took me a day, right, Tajay? It took me one day to drop the model in there. Now, if I want to get more complex visuals and all the rest, different situation. So here's my Copilot. Here's an example. What's the minimum enterprise valuation? That's my prompt. I can drop it in here, copy there, generate the prompt. Hey presto, give me my DAX. So I think this is the key thing around, interesting that the Microsoft chose to release Copilot on Power BI before they released it in Microsoft Excel.
Cool.
I would suggest just checking the DAX it generates for you, because it doesn't always get it right.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's early days. Absolutely, Jeff.
It
Yeah,
does write
100%.
some weird stuff sometimes. So
it does.
it's not,
it does.
yeah.
It's like all AI, right? You know, you got to be careful what the AI
Exactly.
says. We had to
Just be
fix
careful.
the AI bot before because it's something that Jeff and I thought was quite funny and it wasn't quite appropriate. So we had to fix that. So I think this is really, really an innovative and definitely worth the wait, definitely worth, you know, the investment in terms of learning. I'm on a trial. The trial is now locked. It's indefinite. I think it's 59 days. It's been 59 days for the last 2 weeks. So I think there are bugs. So do be careful if you are going to start. But I mean, in the space of, since the last session that we had, I've built this sort of stuff, and some of the stuff is really quick and some of it is obviously, it's like everything, right? Models are simple, certain models are more complex. You know, it does take time to grow it and be innovative.
There's a couple of questions. I don't know if you've got time to address those. But Peter Bartholomew is asking why include a fast model doesn't the redundant information cause bloat? Was there a reason that you selected a fast model, or was it just to sort of as an example?
I've got 2 models. So I've got 2 models in here. I've got a fast model because it just flows the session. So we spoke about the fast model before with Craig.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to show people that, you know, this is not about building Power BI on a particular type of model or a particular type of design. This can work with any modeling standard. Power BI can work with any modeling standard, because what you're doing is you're building the outputs of that model into tables to bring it into Power BI. So there's no question that I used a fast model particularly for that reason, because the last time I did this, obviously, you know, I was using a different modeling standard. But the key thing here is around being able to do it. I do have, this is not a fast model. This is the Monte Carlo simulation model. This is the dynamic array model that ran all those simulations. So
Ian would like to know, where is the mind blow emoji in Zoom? There's a comment from Paul about the cost per user license. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. But other than that, I think we're up to date with questions. Is there anything else?
Yeah, licensing is a challenge. There's PPU and there's premium per user. There's RazorRad did a great video on licensing for Fabric. It's actually not as expensive as you think, but now you're paying for compute, right? Storage is cheap, you're paying for compute. So you want to run a model, you want to compute it, you want to update it, you want to refresh it, it's going to cost, right? It's not going to cost a lot, but again, it's how much you use it versus all the stuff that's offline. I'm not paying for compute. I'm not even paying for storage, right? So yes, there are costs involved, but it's about how much more you're going to pay. Put it this way, compare the cost of Fabric versus the cost of Anaplan or one of these other third-party tools, and you'll find it's significantly cheaper. So when you talk licensing and comparing to third-party tools, massively different.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up. I know we could keep talking all day. I just just want to keep it to an hour.
Sorry about that. Yes,
that's all right. We are certainly going to go on to number 3. When I close off this session, it's going to give you a survey, and you'll be able to give us some comments about what you thought and any sort of ideas of what you'd like us to cover in the future. So we'll organise another session, I think. Was there any sort of parting comments from you, Jeff and Craig? Anything you'd like to mention before we close off?
It's been great. I really enjoyed watching Lance go through the Fabric. That's awesome. And he's absolutely right about, you know, do you want to pay for another product, or do you want to stay within the stack? And I think staying with Microsoft is the way I personally want to go.
Anything from you, Jeff?
Yeah, we're all slightly biased in that regard, but yes, I would definitely agree.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean I think the takeaway from today, I think, is that, you know, you can build lambdas yourself, you can do all this sort of stuff yourself, but like, it's going to be so much easier, faster, more efficient, safer as well, because to use the 5G formulas, which have been proven and tested and so on as well, So yes, you could write them yourself, but like you would spend a lot of time doing that. So far better off using the ones that Craig has put together.
All right.
Or you, hopefully.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Thanks,
I haven't
everyone.
read any.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Danielle.
Yeah. And
Thanks.
yeah, thanks, everyone. I'll get the recording out and any materials that they make available, and I'll see you next time. Bye.